Hi, welcome to Titan Talk. My name is Michael, and today we're going to be discussing the brand new press that came out from Lee Precision. This is largely going to be an impressions video, as we just got it set up yesterday and haven't had a whole lot of time to be using it for reloading. But there are some definite features that we want to talk about if you are curious about this press. So we're going to be talking about the capabilities of the press, what it is about it that makes it different than the rest of the presses, and possibilities of why you would be interested in it. So let's start talking about this press. The first thing that I do want to mention is it does not use a turret system. So a lot of you that are using progressives, the turret press, Dillon presses, you're used to having a turret that you set all your dies on. This press does not use that system. In fact, what it uses is a system that the single station presses, the breech locks, use. So there's this breech lock bushing here that holds onto the die rather than having turrets that hold the die. Now you may be wondering what the reason for that is. And even though it seems like it would make more sense to use turrets instead of bushings, there are situations where having a bushing would be preferable. The main example that I'm thinking of is if you are reloading multiple rounds for the same cartridge, having a turret set up for each and every one of those loads could be a little obnoxious. This way, you can have bullet seating dies set on different bushings, one set for the seating depth of a, say, 9mm 115 grain, one set for the bullet seating depth of a 124 grain, and one set for the bullet seating depth of a 147 grain. That way, all you have to do is switch out the bushing with the bullet seating die and adjust your powder measure. Everything else remains the same and allows you to continue reloading. Another difference is going to be the primer feed system is not progressive, or it doesn't self-actuate. What you will need to do is when you pull the lever is use the Lee safety prime to slide it over, seat a primer into the primer rocker arm here, and when you bring it to the bottom of the press, it'll seat the primer. Again, may seem a little counterintuitive for a progressive press, but what that allows you to do is get good visual contact as to if there is a primer in the arm, and it allows you to verify, basically, without a shadow of a doubt, that it is going to prime the case. If you've used some other presses and have had issues getting the primer feed system up running as smoothly as possible, this is an option that allows you to know you're going to be getting those primers seated. All right, so for a closer look to the shell plate area, this is the primer feed system that I was just talking about. Remove the safety prime itself to give you a better, clearer view of what's going on here. But you can feed primers on there by hand, or of course use the safety prime to do it, and it will seat it at the bottom of the stroke, much like many of the other progressive presses that are out. Another thing that I do want to mention that makes this press different than many of the other progressive presses is the ability to disengage the indexing system. So what you would have to do is remove the die in the fourth stage, which will give you access to the indexing rod. Once you've removed the die, there will be enough space for you to just pop it out. And what that'll make happen is now you index it manually between the stages. So with the indexing system on the press, it's going to be much like the Pro 1000, that you can reload up to 223 Remingtons with the auto indexing feature. However, if you want a press that you can get that auto indexing function with your smaller cartridges, but you still want to be able to reload cartridges like the 308 and 30-06, removing that auto indexing function will allow you to reload those on this press because it is no longer limited by where it's indexing. So again, it's going to start indexing here. So you can already tell that you are going to be very limited in what cartridges you can load on the press just because the gap that there is with the auto indexing feature. But with that removed, you can bring the shell plate much further down to about this point here. Now, before I get into what you can all put on this press, I do want to mention that it does not come set up in any way, shape, or form for a specific cartridge. There will be no dies, there will be no shell plate, no powder feed, primer feed, case feed, none of that. It is going to come as blank as possible, except with the bushings that hold the dies in place. The items that you can put on this press, it does fit 4 dies. So the Lee Deluxe 4-die set, every single one of those dies will find a home on this press. It does use the Lee case feeding system. Of course, the powder measure that fits on top of the powder through die works on it, and it does have an anchor point on the shell plate holder, so it does work like the other progressive presses in that regard. As we've already seen, it does have a primer feed system. The safety prime itself is not included, but the actual primer feeding arms are. So if you decide not to go with the safety prime feed, there still is a way to feed primers on this press. It also does include the tool spot here to hold some of the items that you may need for making adjustments on this press, along with, of course, the spot to hold the extra primer feeding arm. Now, even though we don't have it on the press, the bullet feed system does work on this press as well, with the bullet seating die right here. And then, of course, at the shell plate carrier body itself, there is the anchor point for the bullet feed system. So as you probably already recognize, many of the Lee products that you may or may not already own will find a place on this press. All right. So I'm going to be showing you this press in action, just with a couple of cases and bullets. I won't be dispensing any powder or feeding any primers, as this is just a demonstration. I will mention real quick, if you ever do a demonstration like this, which very unlikely that you will, definitely remove the primer feeding arm right here, as what happens, the primer pin gets stuck in the empty primer pocket here, and it can cause it to kind of seize up the machine. So in the unlikely scenario that you're not actually feeding any primers, you should remove that, which is easy enough to do. But much like you expect with any progressive press, it's going to slide the case in here. You're going to run it up, size into prime, seat your primer, and then you can look down, check, and make sure that it's in there properly. Seats the primer at the bottom of the stroke, and now you got another one going up to size into prime. Again, you would bring in the safety prime to feed a primer. It's dumping powder. Switches everything over to the next stage. You set your bullet on there, feed it. Again, bring it over to the next stage, seats it, and now you're kicking off a fully loaded round. Okay, now to show you the operation of the Breech Lock Pro without the auto indexing function on it. So again, bring it up, size decap, set your primer in place, and I find about halfway down is a good spot to start turning the indexing function on it. As if you let it get all the way down to the bottom, this pin here will actually stop you from being able to index it. So it would be priming, running it up, feeding, sizing, and again, about halfway down is where I'm going to want to start turning that and placing the bullet. And you can kind of tell with where I am on here, where it is that it does and does not allow. So once you start getting down to this part here, it's going to be more difficult to turn it, but that is pretty much the sweet spot. It's a little more than an inch above the base itself, where it stops you from being able to index it manually. All right, so that has been my first impression of the new Breech Lock Pro press. I personally do not believe that this press is designed to be a direct competitor with many of the other progressive presses that are out by Lee or by other manufacturers. I do believe that it is meant to fill its own niche in the market, mostly with the ability to switch out individual dies, the ability to remove the auto-indexing feature. These are things that take very specific situations into account and to allow the reloader to choose whether they're going to do it or not. I do definitely believe that using the safety prime is a pretty good option, as it does give you the ability, as I've mentioned before, to visually check and make sure that you're feeding primers. So if you find yourself frustrated with the primer feeding system of some of the other presses, this one is a good option to give you that peace of mind that it is indeed feeding primers. Hopefully this video has been informative for you and give you a good idea of what you can expect with this new press. If you enjoyed the video or found it informative, definitely like and subscribe. If you have any thoughts of yourself, you can leave a comment in the section below. I'm Michael, and as always, happy reloading.